sky for truth. I look across the room. Katie's dressed in full blue, yellows and blues. But I prefer kick drums and red wine. I prefer kick drums.
After the midnight.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Zach.
And this is After the Midnight,
a podcast dedicated to the band The Midnight.
Each week we take a deep dive into each of their tracks.
This week we'll be discussing track 5 off their EP Days of Thunder, Kick Drums, and Red Wine.
We started with a song Disco Ball, which I don't think we released, and it wasn't quite right, and Tim just kept fiddling with it until it became a much more musical track, and that's how that song came about.
No, I think we did.
Oh, you're right. Lay It On.
Yeah,
it was another song. You're right.
Disco Ball was the same day where we recorded the vocals for The Years, somewhere
That's
in
right.
Burbank.
You're totally right.
And the Kick Drums and Red Wine was originally, you had like a tagline called some like, what was it like? Lay it on me. Lay it on me.
Yeah. It's
And
like
then
a kind of a blues song.
Yeah, and that was kind of this. I think it might have been the same day or maybe the same week as we moved forward. So it started out being completely different, and then maybe 2 years down the line, I had sort of done Gloria. We had finished We Moved Forward, and then that song has been through about 5 or 6 renditions of versions and different chord progressions, different synths. Drum sounds, but it's one of the ones I'm the most satisfied with in terms of like what I'll put on if I'm like, because I sometimes put on my own tracks, not because I'm like digging myself, but because it's like it's fun to kind of go back and go, oh, okay, why did I make that choice? And that was a nice synth, I should use that again. And you sort of overanalyze your own stuff, but it's helpful sometimes.
So, like you teased in the last episode, this song, started off as something pretty much totally different. I'd really like to hear some of the early renditions of this. I know there's a demo out there which we haven't heard yet, which we'll listen to at the end of this.
In terms of the structure of the song and stuff like that, it's a really straightforward song. Like it just has a lot of ups and downs. The lyrics are really simple, so you would think that it would be more of like just a quicker process to it. The fact that it went through like 5 or 6 revisions. And then I think it's really, really interesting to hear that Tim said that it started off as like a bluesy type thing too, just because that's not what it turned into. When they talk about like when they did the vocals and stuff, it was the same day that they did The Years. And so just like really, really early on stuff. I just, when you listen to an EP and it's presented in a certain order, like the artist, they wanted us to hear it in this order, but I wonder, we know that they wrote We Move Forward as the first song, but like, where did this fall?
So let's jump right into it. Something I feel whenever the first part of this, it almost sounds a little bit video game inspired. I don't know if you get that.
Yeah, so I haven't mentioned this yet from the production side, but actually what we're hearing right there, that's called an arpeggiator, and you hear that a lot in 80s type music. Like those chords on that synthesizer right at the beginning are so beautiful.
Some look to the sky for truth. I look across the room. Katie's dressed in full blue, yellows and blues. But I prefer kick drums and red wine. I prefer kick drums.
I think that those are themes that we've heard, him use on this EP already. To me, the visual I get when I hear that is the whole world could be going at one speed, but it's like you're in slow motion and you're looking across the room, and that's your person, that's your significant other, and that's all that matters.
And I think the hook also kind of plays into that. Like, he prefers kick drums and red wine, which I say, he likes to make music and, drink
couple things here that I think are really neat is the beginning of the song, we get that 4 on the floor beat, like I mentioned, we've heard that before, and then Tim totally switches it up right here, and it feels more like a real drummer. And what I think is cool is we've referenced it in previous episodes, but Tim seems to be a huge fan of like the toms on a drum set. Usually when you see them live, he's on pads doing toms. And what's cool about that whole section is he's just doing some like really stylistic light tom work.
I love like that. It's like an echo effect.
Some people fight it with devotion, some with gold and some with bourbon. Some like praying to the blue skies, some like putting on a disguise. But I prefer kick drums and red wine.
I think that those lyrics are so powerful to me. Just some people find it with devotion, some with gold and some with bourbon, some like praying to a blue sky, some like putting on a disguise. Like just saying whatever you need to believe, whatever you need to make it through the day or through this life, that's you. Everybody's different, but once again, I think he's saying in this moment, all he prefers is kick drums and red wine. Like nothing else really, nothing matters, in this moment.
So the interesting thing about that solo there, it's done by Tim's brother Oliver, which is, I think that's awesome. I think, if I remember correctly, Tim had kind of mentioned this, and he said, he wasn't as good on the keys back then, so he wanted, somebody that was a little bit more skilled than he was. Because like we mentioned, he was really more of a drummer. I think that's awesome. That kind of kept it in the family.
I just love all the collaboration throughout this entire EP. Like I feel like Tim just reached out to his friends and was just like, hey, I got this new thing going on. I'd love to have you be a part of it. And it's really cool.
That main driving synth is really what does it for me.
All the vintage sounding stuff that we do hear here for how early it was, from my understanding, in the genre. To think that Days of Thunder was released in 2014, so they started on this in 2012. I mean, it's interesting to hear how early this was and him getting into it and how genuine the sounds and the synthesizers feel in this song and throughout the whole EP.
That's the one I'm most happy about, I think, in terms of the vibe and what I like and stuff. But that was hard to get to. That's kind of a tough one to crack, actually, even though maybe it doesn't sound that way.
We both have our realms of expertise, and generally when it's a production, question, Tim has the edge, and hopefully when it's a lyric question, sometimes Tim gives me some hell about lyrics, and I just have to step back and say no.
One thing we just heard in that clip that we had kind of touched on in previous episodes is the respect between the two guys and how they, you know, kind of let each other operate in their own lane, and they trust each other with, you know, Tyler with the lyrics and Tim with the production. So we're gonna listen to the demo version for the first time, and I also want to shout out the Midnight Wiki. They're awesome. They got a lot of great information on the band, and they kind of curate a lot of it. So that's where we've been finding our demos.
Yeah, if you guys haven't checked out the Midnight Wiki and you're, you know, a fan, I would definitely recommend checking it out. It's the midnight.wiki, W-I-K-I. The people over there that have put it together, I mean, it feels like Wikipedia with a really awesome retro theme, and they have just tons of information about every single song, what key it's in, demo versions. Like, it's a huge wealth of information for any Midnight fan, and shout out to them. They've been really awesome about helping us out and giving us any extra information that we, you know, maybe didn't know before. So big shouts to them.
Yep. Let's take a listen. This is apparently really different from what we hear, so.
It's interesting that sound that's kind of in the background that started the track off, that almost reminds me of kind of going back to the years, like the bagpipey type sample that we hear start the years off. I mean, obviously this one's a little bit deeper, but it almost sounds like a manipulated string on like a mandolin. That's a really interesting sound. I just kind of picked up on it, but it's definitely been going since the beginning, and wow, this is totally different.
It's definitely Japanese inspired there, that what you're talking about.
I dig this.
I do too, which is interesting that their demos are still awesome, and even if they're different, they're still awesome.
Yeah, you can definitely hear that this is unfinished for sure. I think that the progressions and stuff in the final version complement Tyler a lot more. But this is cool. I mean, it's crazy to hear this and then hear, you know, the final version. The lyrics don't sound unchanged. It sounds like it's the same recorded vocals. Tim just went in and reworked everything around it. But yeah, you're so right. Like, their demo versions, everything that we've heard so far, it's still really good, and still something that I really dig.
Yeah, I think this, like you're saying, with We Move Forward, I mean, this does lean a little bit more progressive house than the final version.
Yeah, no, that was super cool. And yeah, for anybody who's curious where these demos come from, they're all from their ARG game that came out in the fall of last year. They really dumped like a lot of exclusive stuff in there. So this, as well as the demo of We Move Forward, came out during then. So yeah, this was the working title of this was Kick Drums and Red Wine V2. So yeah, interesting to hear.
So yeah, we kind of asked on Twitter if you prefer kick drums and red wine, and you guys all had different answers. Like, some of you guys said like sax heavy synth and whiskey kind of guy, more of a snare and beer guy. Some of you guys said hi-hats and black coffee, synths and tea. Also, other people online have said stuff like synthwave and rollerblades, and Days of Thunder and bourbon, saw waves and reverb, cats and Netflix. I mean, it's whatever makes you happy. That's all it is. Legos and whiskey.
I'm gonna say pizza and the Midnight Twitch. That'd be mine. Actually, I'm gonna say a 12-inch pie, fresh out of the fridge, nice and cold. But yeah, man, as we're on the second half of the EP, you know, we started off really intense with Days of Thunder, and it was cool to kind of mellow out with this track and get those really uplifting vibes, and I think that really carries through as we finish it out, and very excited to get to that point.
Yep, I'm excited to get into the next song. I'm sure you guys have heard it. It's kind of a big deal. It's going to be an awesome episode. We're really going to dig deep into that song and give you guys something extra special. So.
And yeah, guys, thanks for listening with us. Have a good one.
We'll see you guys next week.